Welcome to our S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. In this series, we have been working through the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles and seeing things a little bit differently than we see in the Kings.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So Kings has a little bit more action in it, right? Or a little more conflict on a personal level.
Yeah, there's the conflict. There's a more political flavor to it.
Yep.
A lot of some of those details. Whereas Chronicles, you really sort of get a step back, see a bigger picture.
Yeah, I think we even said it's really from God's point of view, you know, how God sees it. And we see that again this week.
Yeah.
Some of the conflict that is in Kings doesn't show up in Chronicles.
Right.
Which is interesting.
And so the story of Chronicles, or the story, not the story of Chronicles, but the stories or the accounts in Chronicles seem like they're compacted. Because God's really only giving us the pertinent details to, like you said, his view that he cares about. Right. Yeah. So this week, we're in our 3rd week of 2nd Chronicles, and we're in, Third week. Okay. And we're in chapters 8 through 11. And let's just walk through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Walk through it like we
so if we walk through it a little bit, it starts out with Solomon finishes the temple. We've only been talking about that for a little while. But he finishes the temple and the royal palace, and it took him 20 years. Right? Now, was that, from start to finish, or are they still hanging pictures or what? But it took about 20 years.
She couldn't figure out the carpet color.
And they had to reduce too. Things. So we're 20 years into Solomon's reign now.
So we're halfway, because he reigned for 40 years,
which is an incredible long time.
It really was, especially for as mostly peaceful as his reign was.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, one of the first things that happens is some land is returned to him.
Yeah.
And in Chronicles, it sounds all nice. More than likely, there might have been some more warfare then, but it was taken and he developed land. And like you were talking, the promised land, he was either there or almost there, right? With the amount of land that he had. Yeah.
So if we jump ahead just a bit, we see in chapter 9, toward the end of chapter 9, it says he ruled all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River on the east side to the land of the Philistines and the border of Egypt on the west side. That's really close to what God had told Abraham in Genesis 15, that I will give your descendants all this land. So how it worked exactly, obviously there were other nations there. They were giving him money, paying him taxes, which we'll see in a bit. Yep. But never fully quite everything that God had promised. Yeah.
Right, but certainly for him, promised, intellect, wealth, all that. Well, we definitely see this week.
Yeah.
Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter. And then moved her from the city of David to a palace he built. So is that an indication that he knew that it was wrong to marry Pharaoh's daughter?
Well, he knew that it was wrong to get horses from Egypt. So was it wrong to
get
his wife from Egypt as well? I think it's interesting what he said, that it's not just that he moved her, but chapter 8, verse 11, my wife must not live in the palace of King David of Israel, because the places where the Ark of the Lord has entered are holy. So I think there's something going on.
He doesn't think it's right. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah. At the very even if it wasn't sin at all, he did not want to be bringing an Egyptian wife into where God was.
Right. So he built her a palace.
Right. But doesn't that show the trajectory of where he's going, though? I know it's not right, but I'm going to do it anyway, and at least I'm protecting what God likes.
Right. But also in 8, he kept all of David's religious requirements.
He did.
So we're all like Solomon, right? If we put it in today's terms, he played church, but he, sinned on the side.
Yeah.
Type of deal.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was chapter 8.
That's yeah.
In chapter 9, the Queen of Sheba visits.
Yeah.
So who's the Queen of Sheba?
Well, tradition says she's from Ethiopia.
Okay.
I met her last night.
Yeah.
They're actually the Ethiopian Orthodox religious people are really, really strong on this point.
Right.
Like, she was Ethiopian. She was the queen of Ethiopia.
Sure. Go with it, right?
Yeah, go with it.
Take it.
There's a tradition that the Ark of the Covenant is being protected in Ethiopia. There's also a tradition that she got pregnant by Solomon. She came back pregnant, and Solomon's son then helped
was on
perpetrate the Jewish belief
line?
system in the Ethiopian
nice.
line. And so that's why there's a really strong Jewish connection in Ethiopia, all the way even to the beginning of the church. Acts chapter 8, there was this eunuch from Ethiopia.
Right.
Why was he in Jerusalem at one of the main feasts?
Right. Good point.
Going back, he's reading the scroll, Isaiah 53.
Right.
Why
How
would he
can
be
I
reading the
understand
scroll? Yeah.
Well, somebody explains it to me.
So, I mean, that's a 900, almost 1,000 year
Wow. Nice.
span from Solomon to Acts 8.
Good.
So,
Good. So there's a line in there that I like. So the Queen of Sheba visits, and we'll find that a bunch of kings and queens, they want to come to Solomon's castle, his empire, really, at this point, because I think it was so spectacular.
mm-hmm.
And she even says, man, even your attendants are truly happy.
Yeah.
And how cool is that?
Yeah.
Well,
can you imagine standing in Solomon's court day after day, just listening to him think?
Right.
Listening to him as he's writing all of the things he's writing, dictating, all of this stuff.
He always said he had to be a type A personality. Probably didn't sleep, and he was probably had
3-4 hours a night.
5 or 6 things going at once and jumping from one thing to another. Great time to be alive. Great time to be there.
Well, and it's interesting because the queen actually pulled out what the purpose of Israel was at the time. God was doing all of this for Israel to be a showcase for himself. He wanted the nations to come and see the temple and see God's presence and the blessings on Israel, so that they would believe in him, which she did. And she's saying, I don't know why everybody isn't doing this. And God is saying, well, I've set it up so that everybody would do this.
Yeah. So here we go.
Yeah.
So she gives him a lot of wealth, and he gives her even more in return.
Yeah.
In chapter 9, we get an idea of how much money Solomon is really bringing in. Said he received 666 talents, and I did some math, and I came up with 1.3 billion. So he is getting, in today's numbers, 1.3 billion a year. Plus
3,000 years ago.
Yeah, plus. Right? There was a bunch of other things that this wasn't included in.
Right.
So just on a scale of what was happening was just astronomical.
Yeah, we talk about the billionaires or the multi-billionaires that we have today.
Right. And that's just recently.
Right.
I mean, I'm old enough that I don't think there were any billionaires.
But he's pulling this in every year.
Right.
I mean, how it just... I love.
So check out what he's doing, right? I mean, he's doing a bunch of things, right? There's this. He has a fleet.
Oh, I love this. I love this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so I'll let you take it.
Solomon's Navy. It says that they came back. It says they sailed the seas. It doesn't say sailed the 7 seas, but that's how I read it.
Right.
Once came back into port once every 3 years with gold and silver and apes and peacocks.
Right, so they're bringing back cool things.
Yeah.
Right, things they find on their journey that, no one else would know.
So how far do they have to be going that they're coming back to Israel only once every 3 years?
Right.
There's a lot of...
I take that as leeway. Look, you gotta come back.
But I really want to see you again.
But go further. Explore
the world. Yeah.
Right, and enough ships to do that.
Well, and there is increasing archaeological evidence that Solomon's Navy did touch every continent, went all over the world. There are places that are hard to get to by foot anymore, but helicopters have gone up like in the Andes Mountains in South America and found Proto-Hebrew carved on walls. Yeah. Benjamin was here, type thing.
Right.
Whatever. And just all over the world. And they're actually, it's really crazy. It's sort of cool, actually. Jewish, Hebrew influences on every continent.
Right.
And I think it dates all the way back to the Navy here.
Yeah, right. Going around just with the wealth.
Yeah.
Right. So,
what does Jerusalem look like? You got these monkeys running around. You got these peacocks strutting through Solomon's palace.
how cool would that be?
You think of the Disney movie Aladdin, right? You got and the genie singing and all this stuff. The camels and the peacocks and all this stuff.
It might have been
nothing. I mean, that's nothing compared to what Jerusalem. So how much? I mean, it says silver wasn't even worth anything.
Right.
How much gold do you have to have in a place where silver? It's just
right.
You're going to pay me with silver?
Yeah. So Solomon rules for 40 years, and it seems like a peaceful transition to his son.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need to remember this was the golden year, right?
Yeah.
It gets worse from here, but this was as close as we get to what God intended.
Yeah. The next time it's going to be anywhere close to this will be Messiah's kingdom.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Solomon's son takes over. So was it a peaceful transition?
Well, it
wasn't Chronicles.
Yeah, the initial transition was peaceful, but the people, I mean, they've been working hard for a long time.
Right.
I mean, we just got done talking about how everything that Solomon was doing, and so they come to Rehoboam and say,
yeah, that's the son, right? Rehoboam.
His son, right? Solomon's son, so still within the Davidic dynasty,
right?
Yeah. Give us a break, and we'll serve you forever. You have our undivided attention and loyalty.
Right. So these are the people from the northern part.
I think it's everybody. Yeah, it's everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's Israel. Right. It definitely from the north, but
so we got a young new king, first king in 40 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. Inexperienced.
I did the math once, and I forgot to look it up. I think he's probably in his 20s at this point.
Okay. So inexperienced, and he makes a tactical error right off the bat.
Yeah, he does.
So what does he do?
Well, they say, give us a break and we'll give you our loyalty.
Right.
And so he consults with his dad's advisors, the old guys, been around for a while, and they say, so give them a break and you'll have their undivided loyalty.
Right. Sounds good?
Sounds good. I mean, everybody with a brain says that's the way to go. Yeah. So he talks with his friends, and I think it's interesting that twice in Chronicles it says the young men who grew up with him, or he grew up with. So these are his friends. These are the guys that he hung out with. These are the guys who grew up in wealth, grew up in the court.
It's all they knew.
Yeah. Yeah. And they said, go back to the people and say, you thought it was bad under my dad?
Yeah. I'm going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, my stick's going to be heavier. My lashes.
Right? Yeah, my whip is going to. And they will bow to you if you're hard. Because if you are too lenient, then they'll run all over you.
Right.
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 So what's he do?
He goes back and says that to him.
He listens to his friends, whom he grew up with.
Yeah. Right. And we have a little bit of a revolution on our hands.
In the year is 931. We've had 3 kings in a united kingdom, Saul, and then David, and then Solomon. And for the rest of the history of the monarchy of Israel, it's split into 2 kingdoms now.
Right. So if you're reading along, one of the things that always threw me is from now on in here, they're going to be talking about Israel, which is really the northern kingdoms.
Yeah. Northern 10 tribes.
Yeah, the 10 tribes.
Right.
And then the southern kingdom, or sometimes we refer to it as Jerusalem, or even Judah, because it's Judah and Benjamin together. Yep. That's the southern part.
Right.
And so we have, I can never pronounce his name right, Rehoboam. Mm-hmm. Rehoboam, who is king of Jerusalem, or the southern kingdom.
Right.
And then we're going to get a king for the northern part, but I think that's next week. Maybe.
So the southern kingdom, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, usually just called Judah.
Because Benjamin was so small, right?
Really small, yeah. That is the Davidic kingdom. That's all that's left that's David's dynasty.
Right.
Okay, so all of the kings of the northern kingdom, and there are going to be 20 in each before the exile. All of the kings, all 20 kings and 1 queen too, in the northern kingdom are not part of David's line. They're not legitimate as far as God's concerned, to the throne. Only Judah has that.
Right.
So what had happened in chapter 10, verse 2, when Jeroboam, the son of Nevad, heard the news that the people were coming to Rehoboam and to ask, can you be lenient on us? He was still in Egypt where he had fled from King Solomon, and so he returned from Egypt. Well, Chronicles doesn't tell us why.
Right.
Okay, well, you have to go back to 1 Kings chapter, I lost it now, chapter 11, and it tells us why. What had happened was God sent, because of Solomon's idolatry, God had sent a prophet to meet up with Jeroboam as he's walking down the road. And he told Jeroboam, I am taking the kingdom away from Solomon. Not the whole kingdom, because I did promise to keep it intact for David, and it won't be in Solomon's lifetime, but I will take it away from him, and I will be giving some of it to you.
Right. He knew what was happening.
So he knew what was happening, and so he escaped to Egypt because he didn't want Solomon to find out and kill him.
Right.
Well, now Solomon's dead. Rehoboam is about ready to make, like you said, a major strategic blunder. Jeroboam comes back from Egypt to watch what's happening, to see if this is how it's all going to play out.
Right.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened. And then this Jeroboam becomes the first king of Israel, the northern tribe. Yeah.
Right.
By the way, Israel sometimes is called Ephraim. So the northern kingdom is either called Israel or Ephraim. I'm just saying,
I'm right with you,
because
that shows up
Judah.
Yep.
But as we're reading through this, now where's Ephraim come from?
Yep, exactly.
That's still the northern 10 tribes of the northern kingdom.
Yeah, I don't think we hit them this week.
Not this week, but it does come up.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd throw it out there. I'm sure I'll say it again.
Yeah. No, good. All right, so then in chapter 11, you can see the war coming.
Yeah.
And you know it's coming. It's there. And chapter 11, God calls off the war, which is kind of cool. But everything changes. And there's not a civil war for now. But if you remember back with Solomon, I mean, we just talked about how great everything was. Yep. It was almost like they were an extrovert, where we're sending people out and we're doing all these things. Well, now we're introvert, and everything's back
circling the wagons.
Yeah, we're circling the wagons. We're fortifying the cities. We're stockpiling things, and we are making plans for attacking and being attacked
from our brothers.
Yeah, exactly. Which is worse, so we're stockpiling more.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, civil war. I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
But, so how many years are we past Solomon's reign?
Not many. Not yet. We're in chapter 12. We're only in the 5th year of Rehoboam.
Right.
So this is really, really short.
Right. So in less than 5 years, we're going to be in a civil war.
I mean, I would say it had to have been 1 year, within 1 year, that the people came to Rehoboam and said...
Right, it seemed that way, right? Before the first insurrection happened.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're talking very quickly. It went from, chapter 11, verse 17, there was this group who supported Judah and were loyal to Rehoboam for 3 years. So we're still within the first 3 years of Rehoboam's reign.
Wow. It's
amazing. Really quick. Yeah.
20 years down. Not quite down the toilet yet, but headed that way. We see that downward spiral.
Well, and again, it started not because of Rehoboam, Jeroboam. It started because Solomon, God said, I'm taking the kingdom away because of all of this idolatry. Solomon did this.
Right.
And so we look forward, God's faithfulness, the Messiah will come. So Solomon is sort of a prototype of Messiah. He was David's son, having the kingdom, the land, the wealth, the peace, the whole thing. And what he did not do, Jesus will do. What he did do, Jesus will undo. Sort of like Adam.
Right.
And so we see this foreshadowing as we go through. Yeah. And just a reminder, Rehoboam's leadership skills, or lack thereof, that contributed. But Solomon just didn't pay attention to what God said.
Right. right? But for us, translating it weekly into us, it's, man, where are you putting your faith?
Yeah.
Right? Or are we putting it in men? Are we putting it into a political system? Are we putting it into God?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff, else in here that, as you're reading and you come across something, you're like, hey, they didn't talk about that. Shoot us an email, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us
Right.
and say, there's a lot more stuff in here. Next week, if you're following along with our little blue card here, next week we'll pick up the next few chapters, 12 through 16, and we'll just keep on working our way through. Well, okay. From here through the end of Chronicles, we are now working with two kingdoms, northern and southern, and we are pointed toward the exile, right? Which is where Chronicles is going to end.
Which is really cool because on Sunday mornings we're now talking about Zechariah, which is the end of the
other side of the exile.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Well, make sure that you subscribe and like and do all the social media things. Share these videos if you find them useful. And we'll be back next week as we just keep pushing our way through the story. See you then.
Bye, everyone.